Welcome to PENSARE BASKETBALL Live and the Toronto Raptors Draft Preview Show. This is episode 2 with Nic Thomas. Nic joining us from Australia. How you doing, Nic?
I'm great, man. Great to be here. I'm really excited.
This is awesome. Been following your work for a little while. You do a lot of awesome work with the NBA draft and obviously covering prospects over in Australia, but also here in the United States and North America. This is a very deep draft, or it was a very deep draft until some recent announcements, and that kind of sucks. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of things. We're going to talk about Nic's big board. We're going to talk about, his top 15. We're going to talk about who does or doesn't fit for the Toronto Raptors going forward. We're going to talk about second round draft prospects. We're going to talk about what skills might translate and what indicators might translate to the NBA and which ones might not. So I think we could sort of start. We should start with the plug. If you want to find more of Nic's work, definitely check it out. Substack. Also, check out their YouTube channel. Both links are in the description. All right. Zodiac Jack saying, what was announced? We will get into that. There's a lot of players going back. Really disappointing, actually. Really thinned out the middle of the first round.
Also, stick around for the end. We're gonna be answering any questions you guys got. Absolutely anything. So stick around to the end for that if you have any questions.
Absolutely. Keep dropping questions in. I'm going to keep starring them, drop super chats, whatever, and Nic's going to answer all of them towards the end. Okay, I think we could start with your big board. Now, are you one of those really strange people who has someone other than Cooper Flagg at number 1?
If you've been following my work for a while, you'll know I was very high on Ace Bailey. I still am very high on Ace Bailey. I had him at number 1 for quite a long period of time. I had Cooper Flagg at 3 at one point, with Jilton Harper and Ace Bailey ahead of him. But as of now, I'm all in on Cooper Flagg.
That's good to know. It's good to know.
3 was crazy. 3 was so crazy.
I mean, there was some talk earlier in the season about
Jilton Harper for a month there. He was almost consensus number 1. Outside of your big ESPN big boards, in terms of the draft community as a whole, I think Jilton Harper had a whole month where he was number 1.
For sure. I mean, there was also some Jaeger Demon hype there for a little bit, for about 5 games there with BYU. That was interesting, and certainly that's faded away a lot. But yeah, so beyond Cooper Flagg, obviously this draft has changed a lot, but the big prize at the top of this draft is still Cooper Flagg. What do you like about him? And is he worth the hype?
He's absolutely worth the hype, man. Look, you know what you're going to get with Cooper Flagg, right? He has this rare blend of no matter what, he's going to be a star, right? Very rarely do you see these guys that have a floor of being like an all-star caliber player, right? Very, very rarely. But not only does he have that, he has the ceiling of being, a face of the league caliber guy. So you got the defense you can count on, right? That's not going anywhere, right? He is a all-world caliber defender. He's one of the few people who I believe truly can compete with Victor Wembanyama for Defensive Player of the Years in the coming years. And I'm really excited to see him on that end of the ball. But also offensively, there is a lot of upside there, especially since the turn of the calendar year. His offense has really ticked up, especially in terms of shooting off the dribble. He's been able to create his own shot a bit more. But what really intrigues me is his ability to handle the ball and pass it, right? He's a very, very underrated passer. And I believe he could be, your initiator, your primary initiator, and your primary offensive option, right? Which is something I really, really doubted at the start of the year. And that's actually really important because if you don't, one of the things I value most, right, over the course of an entire year is seeing how a player improves from game 1 to the last game of the season. That's why one of the reasons why I was so high on Ace Bailey, because you see it every single game. He's getting better at every single game, at everything, right? Cooper Flagg's one of those players who's answered literally every single question that's been asked of him this season. And he's just risen to the occasion. I mean, he was 30 seconds away, a minute away from making the national championship game, right? This dude, he's a proven winner. He's a proven winner. And I know he had some moments at the end there that made people question that, but at the end of the day, you can't put more stock into 30 seconds than you can into a whole season of play.
I agree with you. And at this point, it really just remains to be seen which franchise he's going to change. Among the top of the draft, there's a lot of surprisingly good drafting teams this year. See a team like Brooklyn, Sean Marks. I trust that front office. Remains to be seen what's going on with New Orleans. They've got, Joe Dumars up there now. It's a little bit different. Clearly, Danny Ainge knows what he's doing in the draft and in general, right? There's some competent front offices vying for his services and are praying that, on May 12th, that their name is the one that is the last one remaining. Are there any good fits or bad fits for Cooper? I can think of a few good ones, and I can think of like one really bad one. I'm curious what you think about that.
Look, as I said, man, his floor is just so high. There is no bad fit, in my opinion. Right? I mean, who was the team you're thinking of that's a bad fit?
Charlotte.
See, even with Charlotte, and I don't think maybe he doesn't reach that ceiling. There are teams, obviously, there's going to be teams that he's a better fit with than others. His team, he's more likely to reach that ceiling. But even if he goes to Charlotte, right, he's still going to be an all-world player. Whether he ends up being the primary ball handler or the secondary ball handler depends to be seen with LaMelo Ball, right? And I have a lot of very interesting LaMelo Ball takes, whether I don't believe he's the number one scorer he's been made out to be, right? I think he's kind of been forced into that role, and that's why I think he's a better fit with Cooper Flagg than most kind of seem to believe. But even if he goes to Charlotte, he's still going to end up being a top 20, 25 player at absolute worst. There is, in my opinion, no bad fit. The best fit and the fit I'm most excited for would absolutely be with Washington. I love what Washington's building over there. That's probably like my favorite young core in the league right now, right? I'm just trying to imagine like a front court of Cooper Flagg, Alex Sarr, and Bilal Coulibaly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not a front court, but Bilal Coulibaly on the wing. And then you got some interesting prospects. You got Keyshawn George, Jordan Poole's still pretty young. Bob Carrington was obviously severely underrated this year. He should have been a lot higher in Rookie of the Year rankings. And you got some good vets over there as well, right? You got Marcus Smart, you got Chris Middleton, you got Malcolm Brogdon. They're really building something over there in Washington, and I'd really love to see him in Washington, particularly because I feel like that's where he can best unlock his offensive upside.
What about Philly?
Philly, I don't know what to say with Philly, because if they end up with number one, I don't know what their roster is going to look like. There's a very good chance that they end up with number one. That Joel Embiid will not be on the team next year. I mean, Paul George will still be on the team because he can't really move that contract, but I think this team, if they get number one, is not retooling. They're not trading the pick. They're not trying to compete next year, most likely. I don't have any inside information within Philly, but I would assume that they'd be looking towards a rebuild, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a very interesting young core to move forward with. You got Jared McCain plus, Tyrese Maxey. And then adding Cooper Flagg to that. I mean, it would allow them a very easy pivot from one timeline to the other. I think he fits really well with Philly in terms of in the city, right? I know we're thinking a lot of basketball fit here, right? But I'm also thinking culture
pretty
fit.
Grindy. Yeah.
Exactly. So Cooper Flagg in Philadelphia makes a lot of sense to me. What do you think about him in Toronto?
Look, I think he's a good fit there. I'm not sure how it looks offensively, because I'm not sure how this team wants to organize things. You guys got a lot of chefs in the kitchen right now, right? I'm not sure how you feel personally about RJ Barrett, but I know RJ Barrett really had a fantastic season. I'm not sure how you feel about him as whether he's a primary option or a secondary option or a tertiary option, right? I mean, he's probably not primary, but he's somewhere in between there, right? Depending on who you ask. But you've also now added Brandon Ingram. You've got Emmanuel Quickley. And there's still Scotty Barnes. So I don't love his fit, honestly, with Toronto if I had to pick a team that he fits worst with.
Yeah, no, I certainly see that. I think defensively, because the Raptors over the last 44 games of the season were a top 3 defense.
Raptors do need a big, though. Sorry, they do need a big, but I don't think he's ready to be playing center right now. And
would he play power forward?
Pardon?
Could he play power forward though?
See, I'm not sure exactly how that fits though, because are you sliding? Again, there's just so much.
I think the way it would work is he would slide in for RJ, and basically either he'd go to the bench or he'd get traded. And so in that case, you would move Barnes to the 2, which is the position that he played when he was an all-star. You'd move Ingram to the 3, Flagg to the 4, and then move Jakob to the 5. Now your spacing is going to be very mucky, right? Which means probably at some point, Jakob Poeltl is going to be swapped out for a stretch big, at which point you have 3 of the biggest wings, all 6'9", can all handle the basketball. It is
You guys love that, don't you?
Vision 6'9", baby. Vision 6'9". That is the epitome of it. But I think defensively it would make a lot of sense. Offensively, it could be a
For
little bit
sure.
mucky. I think
Defensively, everywhere makes sense. There's no
that's true.
questions for me defensively
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah. So number 2, you have Ace Bailey, and I'm assuming that Ace Bailey is still somewhere here. I just want to throw it out as an asterisk. This mock draft big board is about a month old. A couple of players have dropped out of this, but roughly these are your players. So we could just discuss them. Ace Bailey. I haven't been super high on Ace Bailey. I have him number 6 on my board. You've had
Yep.
him as high as number 1. I've had him as low as 8. What do you see in Ace Bailey that I don't see?
Okay, I do just want to say though, my next board is dropping very, very soon over at Giraffe Stack. So if you guys want that, it's coming out in the next few days. So make sure to tune in for that. But in terms of Ace Bailey, man, he's so hard to read. Honestly, like I'm a lot higher on the floor for him than others are. Right? I think that even at his very, very worst, he's an elite level role player. What kind of role player? I'm not sure. He could be a Michael Porter Jr. Right? A movement shooter, rebounds the ball well. And all the kind of physical tools for defense to where he's not a liability. Or he could be a legitimate 3-and-D caliber role player, right? Just purely based on his size and his length. I think he plays very well. He can operate very well as a help side defender, point of attack, if he can just lock in on that end and improve in a few little areas. He has the athleticism, the length, everything you want defensively. He just has to put it all together. Now, that's his flaw. What excites me about Ace and what makes him so hard to read is that I truly believe his ceiling is like face of the league caliber, right? I'm talking top 5-ish player in the league very, very easily if he reaches that peak. Now, I'm not sure. It's going to be very fit and team dependent whether he reaches that. It's not going to be entirely up to just Ace, right? Hitting that next step. He needs to go to the right situation for that, right? And so that's why his position on my big board is probably going to be a bit more locked in rather than go up and down as it is right now after the lottery when it kind of seems clear where he's going to go or we have a better idea of where he's going to go. But, I mean, his self-creation gets a lot of cops quite a bit. I think while it's not ideal, his handle isn't the tightest handle in the world, right? It's better than people give him credit for. He can create his own shot, and at the end of the day, he can get himself open like that at will, right? He's got that kind of, and I know we throw KD around so much, and it shouldn't be, right? KD should not be thrown around like this much. Jonathan Bender got Kevin Durant comparisons, right? Jonathan Isaac got Kevin Durant comparisons. We shouldn't be throwing around KD like this. But Kevin Durant himself came out and said that Ace Bailey is a better shot maker than Kevin Durant was in college. This guy can get his own shot at will. He can shoot over people, and there's nothing you can do about it. When his shot is falling, there's nothing you can do about it, right? And so if he can get that on a consistent basis, I'm not sure there is a whole lot defensively that you can do to stop Ace Bailey, right? And on top of that, he doesn't finish extremely well at the rim, but he's getting better every single game, right? That's one of the main things, because I wasn't extremely high on him at the start of the year either, right? But it's just guys that improve every single time you watch them typically turn out to be the guys that progress really well at the next level at the league, right? Over the course of years, right? He's gotten better every single time, and he's got the athleticism, right? And it's functional athleticism. One thing that people underrate is how functional is players' athleticism, right? Because just because someone can jump 40 inches in an open gym, right, hitting the vertical measurer, right, doesn't mean they can do that in the game because they may not have it. Scoot Henderson's a great example, right? He is not showing off that athleticism that he has in an open gym, right? That made him such an exciting and such a touted prospect because it wasn't functional athleticism, right? He's not able to really, at 6'2", you have to be a really special athlete and insanely strong to actually get up there and get these crazy dunks that he was getting in open gyms and showing off, right? Not everyone's athleticism is functional, and Ace's is. He's able to go up. He's not, he has to put on strength, but he has the right frame for it. But he knows how to use his body, and he has a good core strength to where he can use that athleticism well to finish around the rim. And as I said, he's gotten better and better at that over the course of the year. And his rebounding has improved a lot, and his shot blocking has improved a lot too.
I think there's a lot of appetizing tidbits, with Ace, right? The shot blocking, the high release point, the plus size. potentially decent playmaker. I've seen a little bit more playmaking at the high school level, right? Wasn't in the greatest situation, let's say at Rutgers. Granted, it's a
Absolutely.
situation he put himself into, but still, like I think if you look at the roster around him and Dalen Harper, it's hard to argue that anyone did more with less than those guys. It's almost like when you look at Colin Murray Boyles, right, with South Carolina, like that's just not a good roster.
Yeah.
So it's hard, I guess, to make that jump. The other thing that I would say is if there's any player typically who's gonna really make a maybe unprecedented leap at the NBA level, it's probably going to be a big wing, right? The increased court, space, there's more spacing, better talent, etc. Wider angles to attack. Typically college courts are a little bit small, might be a little bit more cramped. Do you
Especially
feel like
Rutgers. There was no floor spacing or movement at Rutgers. And that's why, again, I think he's a better passer than he gets credit for. Because while they didn't necessarily translate to assists, he was actually, like, his vision, if you really watch the games, and it's not happening 10, 20 times a game, right? But you'll see these little passes. You're like, how did he see that, right? He actually has good vision. It's just about actually getting the ball there, if that makes sense.
No, I completely hear you. And I think with the wider angles and better talent around him, some of the playmaking advantages might be unlocked. Maybe some of those straight line drives are a little bit more uncontested. There's just better spacing at the rim. Sometimes at the NBA level, it's college paint is sort of packed, right? So I think there's sort of this idea that, oh, you couldn't get to the rim regularly in college, you probably won't be able to do it at the NBA. And it's like, actually, you might be able to do it a little bit better at the NBA level. So yeah, I think he needs to get stronger. Is there maybe like a best fit, worst fit for Ace Bailey? Because I think this is really fit dependent, and it really is going to matter for him.
Yeah, look, I don't love his fit in Charlotte really at all. Really don't like him in Charlotte. I don't love him
in Washington.
With Washington. See, that excites me because there's a bit more offensive, room to grow. And so if you want to give him the best chance of reaching that ceiling, maybe Washington's the move, right? And he's got good defensive around it as well. That's going to make him look better defensively. Not that he's a better defender than people give him credit for, but it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. My phone got cut off. I just read the comment on the screen.
Yeah.
But no, you're good. And so I feel like Washington, is probably the best fit. As I said, I don't like him with Toronto or Charlotte, or really the Sixers either. Utah intrigues me depending on the Lauri Markkanen situation, though.
Yeah, well, Lauri is officially tradable now.
Yes.
He wasn't tradable all of last year, but now he's tradable. And I think he's a lot better than the player that we saw last year, but I don't know where his value is right now in the new CBA. I was kind of hoping the Raptors would make a trade for him personally. I think he would fit really well. All right.
Another 6'9" guy who can handle the ball and shoot.
He's actually closer to 7 feet. So yeah, definitely. Well, hey man, I like size to skill, man. Okay, number 3, VJ Edgecombe.
Oh man, I love VJ.
I think a lot of what I saw from him in Bahamas is not what I saw from him at Baylor. So I wonder if he can play point guard. That's a question I had. I wonder how he'll measure. I mean, I wonder what type of defender that people actually think of him as at the next level. Like, do people see him as a really good defender, or people do, or do people see him as this guy's going to be first team all defensive guy for like the next 10 years? Like,
look, he's probably a top 3 like perimeter defender in the class. So it goes Cooper Flagg and Rasheer Fleming. You can have those either way, and then it's VJ.
I would push back with Carter a little bit.
Sorry, I mean, when I said perimeter defense, I mean like switchability on the perimeter and also being able to guard the ball.
So point of attack defender.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, sell me on why you have VJ Edgecombe so high.
Well, I actually had him at 2 at the start of the season. My very first big board of the year, I had him at 2. I was very, very high on him. That was around the time when he was playing for the Bahamas. He really excites me. As I said, the defense is fantastic. Super athletic, really long. One thing, though, no one is sure of his measurements. And so he is a massive name to watch at the Combine because his stock could drop substantially if he is 6'2", right? Or 6'10", if he's like closer to 6'3", then he is like 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
Right. There's a very good chance he drops out of the top 5. Because that defense is a hell of a lot less projectable. He's also been a much better shooter, particularly off the catch over the course of the year. He's improved substantially. That was his biggest question coming into the year. And that really excites me. And so, the finishing at the rim is great. We've all seen, the highlight plays. I do see him as more of a backup point guard than most. Some people see him as a shooting guard, small forward. I don't think he really has the length to be a small forward and guarding small forwards, if that makes sense. Because I don't believe he's what he's listed at. I do believe he's shorter. I'm just waiting on confirmation for that. But I do think he can be he's never going to be a primary initiator for the whole game, but maybe he can slide over for small stretches, right, while your primary point guard takes a break. I do believe a bit more in his playmaking than others.
I think he'll probably be like a sixth man at the NBA level.
Right? Really?
Yeah. Okay. I think he has combo guard tendencies. If the shot making can come along, the catch and shoot is promising with him. He's got, granted, he's probably going to measure in around 6'3" barefoot. That's kind of the hope, at least, that he'll measure 6'3" barefoot. If he measures 6'2" barefoot, it could get worse.
If he's less than 6'3", it might. Oh, yeah. I don't think he might not even be like top 6. He might end up like falling like 6 or 7. There's a very good chance of that.
I think that's very real because every year there's a couple of players that sort of rise up draft boards. A few years ago we saw with Dyson Daniels, right, where we were seeing him mocked second round. Then we got into the workout phase, and suddenly teams got to meet him, and he's just so impressively large, right? Dyson's I think 6'7" and a legit 6'7". So when he walks in and he's got broad shoulders, and you see him do some of those athletic test drills and hit some jump shots, and you're like, oh, wow, that's an NBA player. I think when you see a guy who's 6'2", 6'3", some of the athleticism maybe doesn't feel as impressive, unless, of course...
Scoot Henderson is a living example of that, where people weren't any lower on him because of it in the draft, but it kind of showed through later on.
But he was a point guard, and Scoot did have elite wingspan. Right.
He was a point guard, but he was viewed as a point guard, shooting guard. He could have been a combo. If he landed in Charlotte, for example, which looks like it was going to happen for most of the draft, he would have been a point guard, shooting guard. People viewed him that way and thought he would be able to fit in that way.
I think it's because VJ had more of an off-ball role, and Scoot's almost always, whether we're talking G League Ignite or earlier in high school, he's always had more of an on-ball role, right? So I think if you're going to draft somebody who's shorter than 6'3", you want to make sure that they at least have some on-ball tendencies. But nevertheless, we move on to Kon Knueppel, a player that I am very high on and remained very high on, throughout the entire process. Once I really got to watch him, I thought he was fantastic in the tournament. What do you like about him?
He just does everything, man. Like, I think was given this label at the start of the year, which was completely false if you'd actually watched the tape, but he was just given, the generic Caucasian label, which is just being a shooter. He is so much more than a shooter. He can be a secondary, tertiary ball handler, passer. He can operate really, really well out of pick and roll. Obviously, he is a shooter. He can shoot the three really, really well. He just does everything right, and I think he's a very underrated defender as well. He started off the year not shooting the ball the way he was expected to, and he was still outperforming expectations despite that, because people were just like, wow, I didn't know this guy could defend like this. I didn't know this guy, in terms of like a team-centric way, right? I didn't know this guy could defend like this. I didn't know this guy could play make like this, especially out of the pick and roll, because he had someone like Khaman Malauch who excels in the pick and roll to try and to really amplify that. I'm very high on Kon Knueppel.
Yeah, I am too, and I think the shot making excites me. It's like, yes, like there's certain players where you look at a guy like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, where you're like, you know what, they can play a certain role in a limited capacity as they figure out the other elements of their game. Kon at worst is going to be a 6'6" I don't know if he's 6'7", but like 6'6"
I've heard he might be closer to 6'8".
I have serious doubts about that. If he yeah, he's not going to measure 6'8". I'm actually like, they were saying he's closer to 6'7", and I've seen him. Doesn't strike me as 6'7". It might be the slightly short legs.
By the way, I haven't seen him live, obviously being here in Australia, but that's just kind of what I've heard from him. Same thing with Liam McNeely. He's probably going to measure higher. And he
he
was.
might be a little bit taller, but nevertheless, like at worst, this is going to be a really smart decision maker who can shoot the piss out of the basketball and can at least hold his own a little bit defensively,
I haven't
right?
heard that one before.
Shoot the piss out of the basketball. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think at worst case, you have a really good role player while he figures out maybe something more than being a role player. I do think he can be more than a role player. I think he can be a
Definitely.
very complete basketball player. I think he can be a
Look,
secondary option on a really, really good team.
I don't think. I mean, they're not exact. Like you don't watch him and think it screams his play, but in terms of like just being able to do everything from that wing spot, and he's not quite. He doesn't have the whole drawing charger thing that Austin Reeves does, but I see him in quite a Austin Reeves quite role, if that makes sense, even though they aren't extremely similar players.
I can certainly see that. I see a little bit of Devin Booker in his game as well. There's just bits and pieces. I think when you can shoot that well and you have a tight handle, compact, low center of gravity, there's a lot of good things that you can do, right? And I just genuinely appreciate just the angles that he finds. He's very crafty, which I like. Next up, we got Jeremiah Fears. Now, Jeremiah Fears to me is a little bit like Ace Bailey, which is like there's a lot of boom and bust.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a version of this that looks really bad and is out of the league in 5 years. There's also a version of this that's a star. Clearly, you have them this high because you're probably leaning more towards the second outcome. So, what do you like about Jeremiah Fears?
Man, look, his offensive tape is just so impressive, right? I think he's a better playmaker than people give him credit for. But if you go there and you go sit down and you just watch the tape, give it 20, 25 minutes, man, it's probably some of the most impressive offensive tape from an 18-year-old I have ever evaluated, ever, right? He does everything. He can score it for you off the dribble, right? He can play off the ball. He can score off the catch. He can shoot it from inside, from the mid range. He can score inside. He just does everything, right? And it's so impressive. And so I value that quite highly, considering he's also a year younger than all the other freshmen, right? He's reclassified up a year, same way Cooper Flagg has. And so I put a lot more value into his flashes and what he's been able to show than his production.
And his production wasn't bad.
No, not at all. I mean, he had that run where, like, didn't he score back-to-back like game winners for Oklahoma at the start of the year when suddenly he was on the map as a lottery caliber guy, right?
I mean, he's just very tough. And you know what? One thing that I really appreciate about young guards is, do you like contact? Like, do you shy from contact or do you invite contact? And he seems to really just go right into it. He's completely fearless. And I really like him as a player. I question his playmaking. I question his decision making in the pick and roll scenarios. I think the Raptors would be a great fit for him because I think they have a guard whisperer in their head coach in Darko Rajakovic. They've done a lot of really good work in terms of making players better playmakers. And I think if you can take a twitchy athlete like this who can get paint touches at will and turn him into a good decision maker, I think you have the makings of an all-star. I think he's got that type of upside. So definitely really like him. Now, my favorite prospect in this draft, actually, since the very, very start, has been Khaman Malauch. I have mocked him to Toronto every single chance I got, and he's got a bunch of visa issues right now that are probably distracting from the overall impact that he had. Yeah, I thought he was one of the most impactful freshmen in the country. You clearly seem to agree because you have him very high. What do you like about
Not high enough, man. I felt awful putting him here. I am so high on Khaman Malauch. I feel awful putting him at 6. I feel awful about it.
Well, but I really hope that a lot of teams have him at 9 or 10 so that he falls right into the Raptors' laps personally. But yeah, like, I mean, vertical spacing threat at the rim, as a lob threat, huge catch radius. I think he's extremely smart instinctually. I think his touch around the rim is incredible, as evidenced by those percentages. I think he showed just an incredible ability to anchor a strong defense in Duke. I think he was reasonably efficient on switch outs, not the most switchable, but I think he showed some good promise there. I seem to believe that he is not in the greatest shape. I think he could be in much, much better shape. I think he's going to grow a lot as an athlete. And I think as that, strength comes along, I think that people look at him and they don't realize how much stronger he's going to get.
Oh man,
he's going to fill out so much.
That kind of solves the rebounding issue as well. Not solves it because he has issues of actually going to get them, but it's going to make it a hell of a lot easier for him to get rebounds.
I agree. And I also think it'll be a lot easier for him to hold position in the post because he does have a bit of a high center of gravity. So, like going up against some stocky, strong guy like maybe an Alperen Şengün at the next level, he might get bodied at this level right now, right? But as he gets a little bit stronger, I think he'll be able to hold his place a little bit better. He'll be able to hold possession on some of those back downs or even on those offensive rebounds. And I trust the shooting. I've watched him shoot in an open gym many times. And, I interviewed one of his trainers last year, Joe Tuamu, when the Raptors drafted Ulrich Shamshi. And I just think, unlike a lot of guys who's 7'2", he doesn't have 7'2" guy hands. He has kind of smaller hands. And it really allows him to shoot the basketball really well. And I love what I saw from him in the Olympics last year for South Sudan. So what do you like about him?
Man, the number one thing that jumps out to me about Khaman Malauch is his ability to just cover the floor, right? You see a kind of almost Wembanyama-esque ability for him to. I mean, there's clips that circulate on Twitter, just about every game from him, right? Where he'll guard 4 or 5 guys in one possession all over the floor, just moving. It's so impressive, and he uses his length so well, and he's so mobile that I think he's probably the best rim protector in the class. And I don't think you can argue a few other guys at number 1 spot, maybe not rim protector, but just general paint protector and enforcer in the draft, and then combine that with his ability to switch out as well. It's very impressive. And you said he's probably been one of the most impactful players this past season in this draft. He's actually the second best impactful freshman in terms of box plus minus behind Cooper Flagg.
Behind Cooper. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about box plus minus and certain analytics when we talk about what translates, what doesn't, because, there's another player that had a really, really high box plus minus 8.8, which was Carter Bryant, in a very limited role, and most of it was made up from his defensive box plus minus, which I think was 5.5, a ridiculous defensive box plus minus, just his impact on that end. In the end, box plus minus is attempting to solve the question we all want to know is your team better with you on the court? How are we figuring that out? Now you've got Rasheer Fleming, and this is about as high as I've seen Rasheer Fleming on anyone's board. I'm assuming you really like him. I'll tell you that I really like how much better he's gotten over the 3 years. It's really you can see it. You mentioned earlier that it's a really good indicator for you when every single time you watch a player. I think that it is just as good an indicator, if not an even better indicator, that a player have steady, projectable growth every single summer. Because, again, I want to know, what do you do in the summer? Do you take your summers off? Are you listening to the right people? Are you working on the right things? It's a big thing for me in pre-draft evaluation to understand, how does a prospect see themselves in relation to reality, right? Some prospects are woefully aware of their weaknesses, and they are extremely well connected with the right trainers and the right staff to put them in positions to actually improve on their weaknesses. Then there are other prospects who are blissfully unaware or unwilling to listen to what their weaknesses are, and they don't get better. Rasheer Fleming has shown me, yeah, exactly. I agree with you. And, Rasheer has shown an ability to just get better. I think this might be a player who measures out a little bit better than his 6'9". He feels huge. I don't know if that's because he's got a 7'4", 7'5" wingspan.
7'5". I was just about to say that 7'5" wingspan probably makes it feel like that. Yeah.
He feels like a center on the wing. It's really impressive. So apart from the clear measurements and the improvement, what do you like about him? And do you see him as a role player at the next level, or might there be some sneaky greater upside in him?
Man, look, I think that there is some upside, and I'll touch on that in a second, but I think he's just most likely to be a very, very, very good role player, right? And at this point in the draft, there probably aren't a whole lot of all-star caliber players left, franchise built around pieces that we know of. Obviously, there's always going to be someone that flies up later on, but he's arguably probably the best defensive playmaker in the draft behind Cooper Flagg, right? He shoots 41% from three off the catch. That does drop to 31% when he is being guarded. However, he's never probably going to be the number one offensive guy. He's probably never going to be the guy that defenses are scheming around, which means if he's in the right system, he's going to get a whole lot of unguarded looks. And so that's not really an issue for me. Some people are placing a lot of value on that. I don't personally. But I mean, just the defense is insane, man. He's so mobile. The way he just flies around the court is so impressive. Like, it's kind of similar to Khaman before. You'll see him guard 3-4 guys in a single possession, right? And as you said, he's like a center out there. He's so big and he's so switchable. He just does everything right defensively. And I'm really excited to see what he can do at the NBA level. Now, there is a little bit of upside there. I kind of see, I'm not sure if you guys, if you remember this, but there was a part there of the season where Jaden McDaniels suddenly became a really good offensive option this season and had that little run. I can kind of see that with Rasheer Fleming down the line.
Okay. Well, I mean, Jaden McDaniels did just have a pretty damn good game in the playoffs.
Yes.
You know, so yeah. And I mean, if you watch Jaden in high school, he did have a lot more game than he's been showing at the NBA level. That would be a very interesting player. And I think he's also got like a much bigger frame than Jaden McDaniels. I think like he may be around the same height, but he's got like the broader shoulders and he's already got a lot more weight on him than Jaden did when he was coming out. So, again, probably more of a power forward style player. Here you've got Dylan Harper at 8. Now you've obviously moved Dylan Harper up since this point, but how do you feel about Dylan's season at Rutgers? And do you feel, as I feel, that this probably is just like Cade Cunningham all over again? Like, do you see the Cade Cunningham stuff? Or do you
I do, but see, I'm much lower on Dylan Harper. I kind of want to bring, and this isn't a player comparison at all, but someone I like to bring into these Dylan Harper discussions is Killian Hayes. Because I feel like with Killian Hayes, what went so wrong with him is that everyone was just so focused on what he does well and put so much emphasis on that and didn't put any emphasis on the things that he did wrong, right? There was more emphasis on the good and the bad. And there is plenty of good with Dylan Harper, right? As I said, he's higher on my next board, right? Really, really good finisher at the rim. Gets to the rim at will. You just watch him and he stands out, right? He's one of those guys, you watch him and you know he's there. He's not going to disappear on the floor. He does a bit of everything. He's a good playmaker. But just as a lead guard, you have to be able to shoot off the dribble. You have to be able to create your own shot off the dribble. And at least at like a solid level, you don't need to be Steph Curry, right? But you need to be able to do it at a projectable level. And while I did give Ace the benefit of the doubt in the system with his playmaking, because there wasn't a whole lot of shooters, there wasn't a whole lot of spacing, Dylan Harper's never been a shooter at any level. That's always been his number one question, and he's never really been able to show it. And he hasn't really improved on that end for me either at all. And that's kind of concerning for me. Some people think that Dylan Harper's a franchise-changing guy. Well, if he's a franchise-changing guy, he's going to have like a 30% usage percentage, right? He's going to have a very, very high usage rate. And so do you want someone handling the ball or having like a 30 usage rate who can't create his own shot? And guys, people can just kind of stack up the paint on against him. I mean, he's going to be exposed in the playoffs, right? If he doesn't develop that shot, and I'm not very sure if he can, because he hasn't gotten.
Is he what you would classify as a below the rim finisher above the rim finisher? He's
never gonna really like. He's not like Russell Westbrook, right? Where he's charging into the rim and throwing down crazy posted dunks every 10 possessions,
or even
right?
Jeremiah Fears.
Exactly, but he can get into the rim and he can score just as efficiently as those guys can, just less spectacular.
Yeah, I can certainly see that there's probably been a lot more discussion about what he does well than what he doesn't do well. So I appreciate you bringing up what he doesn't do well. I think it's definitely worth noting. Now, a player that I started out maybe top 8 on, but have since moved into my teams is Kasparas Jakucionis. I don't know how you feel about him today, a month later, but how do you feel about Kasparas Jakucionis?
Yeah, I will say just after this play, I think we'll probably move on to other topics after number 9, because I think now this is where we're kind of getting into this guy didn't declare kind of range. But
if you don't mind, I would like your thoughts on Carter Bryant as well.
Yes, yeah, sure, that's all good.
Yeah.
With Jakucionis, man, the playmaking is just so great. I bring it up again. If you want someone handling the ball, 25, 30% of the time, You want them to be able to shoot off the dribble, create their own shot. Jakucionis can do that. Fantastic playmaker, great vision, does a little bit of everything on that end of the ball. And so I just really like him. I can kind of see some Tyrese Halliburton light kind of in him, if that makes sense. And I think people are placing way too much emphasis on the last few games of the season, which were very, very ugly. Than they should be, and they're not focusing enough on the rest of the season, which I think was fantastic from Kasparas.
How do you rank his playmaking or passing specifically? Because you said Tyrese Halliburton. How do you rank his light? Okay, okay. I'm glad you say light. How do you rank his playmaking or passing specifically compared to someone like Yegor Demon?
Better because he's the better shooter, if that makes sense. I don't think really. I think they're pretty much identical in terms of actually ability to play make, right? In a theoretical setting, but actually put it into practice because Jakucionis is better at creating his own shot. Defenses are playing in a certain way. And so that's going to create a lot more passing opportunities for him.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So we can get to specifically Carter Bryant. We're not going to get to why you're a little bit lower on Derik Queen, but we could get into that as well because I think a lot of Raptor fans are very interested in Derik Queen. But Carter Bryant is a player that I think is going to fly up draft boards. Number one, I think
he already has mine. And I want to clarify this. He's at the back end of my lottery now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it was April 13th that I posted that I think if the Raptors stay at 8, they could go off the board and take Carter Bryant. And at the time, I didn't see a single mock draft that had him 20. Most had him like 21, 17, 30, like in this range. And me putting him at 8 felt crazy. Lo and behold, a month later, I can't find a single mock draft that doesn't have him top 10. Like most are late lottery, but like NBA.com has him 10. NBA Draft Room has him 10. Ringer has him 10. Right? Like everybody seems to be moving him in that direction. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, obviously the size, right? Just the size, the 3-and-D potential. And also, if you don't watch him fully play, I think you can sell yourself on a version of him that maybe isn't real, right? So a lot of questions about him. If you buy the upside, it's a really easy sell. What are the concerns with Carter Bryant?
There's a lot of self-creation issues, right? And that's why I don't buy the upside. I'm buying the floor. I think the floor is so high. He's so projectable, right? I mean, as a rookie, he's going to come in, you know what he's going to do, and you can rely on him for that, right? Especially for the Raptors, who potentially are looking to make a quick rebound out of this back end of the lottery and trying to shoot right back up again. He's a good pick. As he's just a sure thing, very much, as you said before the show, a hypothetical player, right? The production isn't really there. You have to look at you actually have to watch the games, watch the film, and kind of analyze it and see how it would fit theoretically into an NBA system. And I think he'd excel, especially with the Raptors.
Yeah, I think the 3-point shooting is great. I think the upper part of his shot, I don't think this is a shot pocket that a lot of teams are going to be able to bother, right? 6'8", super high release, big wingspan. I don't think a lot of teams are going to be able to bother the pocket. It's a pretty good release. I think the base of his shot could be a little bit wonky at times. Sometimes when I'm watching him, I don't really love how his legs sit. But there's a little bit of Jason Tatum there. I think a player comparison that I really like to look out for him is a guy like Jalen Johnson, Toumani Camara, just those similarly sized, big wings, transition athletes, smooth movers. Again, people really do take for granted when they're talking about basketball players. Most people who are 6'8" are not functionally coordinated. Like they're very clunky.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a player like Carter Bryant, who at 6'8" moves like a gazelle and runs the court like a gazelle. I think it's his defense that makes him super special. Like if you take the defense off the equation, I think he's like a mid-second rounder based on just his shooting upside.
Yeah.
It's when you add the defense, the youth, way he interviews, the fact that he was injured for nearly 2 years in high school because he broke his foot or broke his leg. Sorry, he broke his leg. The fact that he grew from like 5'11" to 6'8", so he might still be kind of trying to figure out his body. I think there's a lot of you have to really squint and you really have to believe. But if you believe, I think the 100th percentile outcome, if you believe in this version of him, this sort of Danny Granger, upside in him, I think there's a lottery pick in there. And I think there's like a future starter in there that could be like an all defensive lockdown type of disruptor on the defensive end. There's also a version of this that turns into Jonathan Bender, really, like a shorter Jonathan Bender, right?
Whoa, where Jonathan Bender mentions in 2025 is kind of crazy.
I mean, it's true, but yeah, the Raptors drafted Jonathan Bender at 5 and then traded him for Antonio Davis in the year 2000. I think it was year 2000.
Oh, was it 99?
99, 2000, something like that. But yeah, so I mean, yes, Jonathan Bender, Al Harrington, I don't know. Anyways, the final player I just wanted to talk about very briefly was Derik Queen, right? Now, I think Derik Queen is Brooklyn bound. I just feel like he just belongs in Brooklyn. I don't know, Jordi Fernandez, the way he wants to run his system. I think you're a little bit lower on him than the consensus. Far lower. So I'll tell you what concerned me about him when I watched him. I think I've watched about 8 games of his this year. I don't like his off-ball patterns. I don't like what he does when he doesn't have the basketball. Sometimes he just sort of floats around, stands around, and conserves his energy, and sort of like he's picked up a lot of bad AAU habits, and yeah, the shot making is great and the game winner was really nice and all that stuff, right? Also a little bit concerned about him defensively. I know that he has active hands. He can be active, but his motor is a little bit on and off sometimes. I think sometimes he catches himself out of position, off ball awareness, sort of wonky. Don't think he can ever really project as a shot blocker or anchor on that end. So you're always going to have to play him with one. I don't know. And it feels like, yeah, I can see, if I squint hard enough, I can see a little bit of that Schengen stuff that people see with him. I can see a little bit of that Doma stuff. But I also hate that archetype of player. It's just a really hard player to build around. So,
yes. Yeah. Look, all I'm going to say is I think Derik Queen is a player who thinks he's an offensive hub, but he's not. And he's not going to succeed if he's not. If that makes any sense offensively. He's not going to succeed as an offensive player if he isn't playing as a hub, but he's not good enough to play as a hub. That's probably the best way I can explain it.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I think we can move on to second round draft targets for the Toronto Raptors. Are there some names that you wanted to throw out that make sense for you?
Right, yeah. So I've got about 5 names here that I've taken down. First one is Bogolub Markovic, right? You guys are looking for a young backup big. He's super mobile, right? Great pick and roll threat. He has a bit of an underdeveloped frame, but he can add strength to that. He's gotten significantly stronger over the past 2 seasons. He can shoot the ball from deep, and he's a very underrated passer, right? So you said you were looking for that stretch kind of big, potentially, depending on who you take at the top of the draft. Mm-hmm. This could be a guy. And he has some wing skills, right? He can operate as a tertiary or fourth kind of ball handler, kind of like at the top, handoffs, those kind of offensive actions. He can take, he can be a big part of those.
Sure.
Secondly, Janai Broom. Now, I'm quite high on Janai Broom, and I don't know how it's going to end up as a world he gets taken after the lottery, right, in that 15 to 20 range. But you also don't know. I mean, we saw it with Dalton Connect last year. The older guys just tend to fall, right? Even further than we project them to fall, right? And so there's a world where Janai Broom still is there on the board around your pick. I believe your pick 39 for the Raptors in the second round. There's a chance he's there still, right? He's a great rebounder on either side of the court. He doesn't have the best shot yet. It's still developing, but I do kind of believe in it because his mid-range touch is really improving, right? And he's gotten a little bit better year after. And he sets good screens. So if you're taking like a primary ball handler or a guard at the top of the draft, right? I mean, you said Jeremiah Fears, right? If you guys end up taking Jeremiah Fears, Janai Broom is a great screen setter operating out of the pick and roll. Maybe he can bring out the best of Jeremiah Fears as a pick and roll playmaker.
I also like his hands defensively.
Very active defensively. So I was gonna say, gets into a lot of passing lanes, kind of keeps very active hands, as I said. And he really just impacts the game beyond the box score, right? What the box score says doesn't really show just how valuable he is, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, right? Mm-hmm. Very active, moves well laterally and vertically, even though he isn't the best athlete. I feel like he can challenge shots quite well around the perimeter. And yeah, do you have any thoughts on Jano?
I like him. I've called him one of the most productive college players I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely.
I really like him. I like him a lot. I think he runs a little bit funny. And I think, something that I learned watching Moneyball is that when people do things that are a little bit funny or a little bit off, people tend
People
to
don't like
underrate them, right? But at the end of the day, he's proven it on a really high level that he's a very productive and very good basketball player. He's very smart. What do you think of Usman Njai? Do you have any thoughts on him?
Not particularly. I don't really think he's an NBA player. Just isn't good enough. It really. I don't see any of his skills translating. I don't think he's got any real translatable NBA skills.
You don't
I don't think.
you don't think the shooting would translate?
No, I don't think he. Where do I have him on that board? Pull it up. I think I have him around 70 to 80. I don't think he's an NBA player at all, and I don't think he's going to stay in this class. People forget, just because people declare now doesn't mean they're staying in the draft. There's still another 2 chances for people to drop out, and I believe he's going to be part of that. He's just kind of coming back, trying to get some feedback. From what I know, he's just getting feedback, and he's going to go back out, give it another year.
I mean, yeah, certainly. I would have loved for Bapa Miller to come out. To be honest, that's a player that I'm weirdly high on, but I can
like
certainly.
I like him a lot.
Yeah, and Jameer Watkins as well. But it seems like, again, this draft just keeps thinning out. Are there any other names that you?
Yeah,
and by the way, I love Bogu Markovic. Like, I love him a lot. So yeah,
for sure. Yeah, same. I've watched a lot of his games this year. I watched the first game of the season as well. He had a fantastic game. I'm trying to think of who it was. It was an exhibition game. It was like 10 NBA draft prospects. It was like a dream. But next up, we got Alex Tui. I'm very high on Alex, right? There was at one point during this year, I had him in the lottery, back end of the lottery. Just does a bit of everything. He's not going to be a star, but he's a good role player. Active defender. He does struggle a little bit laterally, but rebounds the ball really well. Shoots the ball well, moves well off the ball, and he can create his own shot. So he's just one of those guys that you can kind of plug and play, put him wherever, put him in whatever kind of role, and he's going to succeed at a pretty high level.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are there any players that currently you think maybe are mocked in the first round, but you're almost sure are going to drop like 10, 15 spots?
John Broome was the number
John
one.
Broome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And next spot, I got one more target. Ben Henshaw. Clearly an NBA guy, in my opinion. I'm extremely high on him. I've been high on him all year. Has all the intangibles, spaces the floor very, very well, moves extremely well off the ball, can operate as a primary or secondary initiator, depending on the fit of the team. He can play on the ball, off the ball, and he has just so much energy on both ends. He fights really well over the screens. He's pressuring people 92 feet. He's just a really, really just what you want from a role player. He does so well. And on top of that, really, really great kid. I'm from Perth personally, so I've been able to see Ben Henshaw and Darnell Munster all season. I've gone to all the games. I speak to them after every game because I press access. And from the conversations I've had and from everything I've heard inside the club, Ben Henshaw is just a really, really good kid, really confident in his own abilities, but sort of knows what he has to do. He knows he's not going to be, an NBA all-star, right? But he's really, really confident he can come in and he can contribute at a very high level. Yeah. There's no confidence issues there, which can kind of be an issue with these role-playing guys, particularly internationally where they haven't really had to face any NBA caliber competition yet. That's kind of an issue where either they have too high of an ego and then it kind of, when that doesn't immediately translate when they go over, it kind of shatters. Ben Henshaw doesn't have an ego. He's just confident in himself, but he knows his place, if that makes sense. And that's something I find can make or break a player's career in the NBA if you're like an international guy.
How would you compare him to someone like Hugo Gonzalez?
He's better than Hugo Gonzalez. I don't think Hugo's staying in the draft.
You think he's going to pull out?
Yeah, we'll go back. He barely got any playing time this season with Real Madrid. He was getting DNPs for the first half of the season. I think he didn't get to show everything he wanted to show. And if he declares he's going to end up at the back end of the second round, maybe early second round if someone's like a flyer, and he's not really going to get the chance that he wanted to.
I think if he gets a first round promise, like a late first round promise, he'll probably stay. But
absolutely.
I looked at a player, 3 players: Ben Seraph, Hugo Gonzalez, and Mario Saint-Supré. And I think Saint-Supré is already going back to, back. So unfortunately, that draft just keeps getting thinner and thinner, which actually brings me to my next point, which
Supré
is
wasn't a guy for this draft. He's only eligible next year.
he's not eligible. He wasn't eligible this year?
No.
Oh, damn. Okay, I stand corrected. So what do you feel about the players that have sort of left this draft, unfortunately? I mean, there have been a lot of really prominent names. JT Toppin is one of them. Clearly.
I had him at 11, man. I'm so disappointed. Look,
yeah.
I've been fighting tooth and nail all year because there's been so many questions about the depth of the class. I think that, even in the first round, there's going to be a lot of misses because I think once you get out of that lottery and you get out of that kind of sure thing area, teams tend to take some flyers and some young guys, and they're not going to work out. But I thought there's just so many really, really great upperclassmen that are going to declare and that are going to be in this class, in the second round, and that in 5-10 years we're going to have in that 15 through 30 space, in like a redraft, that the class is going to have great depth. Now, though, I'm not as sure. Like Ryan Kalkbrenner didn't declare, JT Toppin didn't declare, as you just said. Those are two guys I had in my top 15, like gone like that. Micah Peavy didn't declare. Max Schulger didn't declare. All these guys I was so high on all through the year have just aren't declaring.
Well, Alex Caravan was another player that I was pretty high on. Bennett Sturtz was a player that I was a little bit high on, at least as a second round target for the Raptors. Thomas Hoff, I think, could have been a very interesting, big wing forward type. And seeing all these players now, I actually didn't know about Ryan Kalkbrenner until you just said it. So that sucks because I just found that out right now. So
I was shocked. I was shocked. Like I don't know how he's going to get more eligibility.
Is he like 24?
He's 24. I just didn't. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know what he's planning on doing.
So what does this do for next year's draft? Because, I mean, next year's draft is already loaded. There's 3 guys at the very top of next year's draft that I think could go number 1 in a lot of drafts. And then on top of that, you have, a lot of lottery depth, including, your Aussie boy Dash Daniels, who I think is fantastic.
Hey, Dash thinks he's in that conversation for number 1 as well. So
I don't know if he's in that conversation for number 1, but he is definitely one of my favorite prospects in next year's draft.
Likewise. But I love his confidence. If you guys want to see, I interviewed him yesterday. That's live on Draft Stack's channel. You can check that out. Really insightful interview on Dash Daniels, who's one of the best international guys in this draft. And I got one with Kareem Lopez dropping soon as well. So those are 2 top 10 guys that I'm interviewing, if you guys want to check those out. But yeah, it's a very, very deep class. I'm very excited for next year. There's a lot of star power. There you go. Dyson Daniels, thanks for the plug. But there's also a lot of depth in terms of role players. I mean, Kareem Lopez and Dash Daniels probably won't be stars, but they're going to be very, very good players, right? Very, very good role players, very projectable role players, and I really believe in the class. Now, Elijah Arenas, I don't know what's up with that. That's very unfortunate, and that's definitely going to weaken the class a little bit. I was very excited about him reclassifying. It's like, how much talent can you have in one draft class? But, I mean, Tyron Stokes may also be reclassifying. There's rumors about that. That's the number 1 guy in 2027. So you could have 4 or 5 guys competing for that number 1 spot, plus whoever comes along. There's always someone, like you said at the start of the year. Jaeger Demon had a moment there where there was some consideration. Dylan Harper had a moment there where there was some consideration. There's going to be more guys popping up as the collegiate season kicks off. And I'm very, very excited.
You had to guess right now who's going number 1.
Age of answer, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm 100% on it. Yep.
I'm not 100% of that at all. I feel awful saying that because I'm so conflicted about it. But I think he just kind of jumps off. He really just jumps out at you watching him play. And I think that's just going to be that he has the it factor. Darren Peterson is a fantastic prospect. Camboose are fantastic prospects. In my opinion, they're literally all the same caliber of prospect. But age probably just jumps off the page a bit more and off the screen.
Yeah, I think he has that it factor as well. He has a little bit of that Mamba stuff with him, he's so wise beyond his years. I listened to an interview of his when he was 16 years old, and I was like, is this like a 60-year-old talking? He's so, and I think, I think his size.
He's not doing too much. He's not about that party life from what I know. He's pretty chill kid.
Yeah, well, he's going to be making a lot of money there for sure. That NIL deal is going to be amazing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about three traits that translate from college to the pros and three traits that don't. I'm curious what those are. Now, I've often heard this old adage that rebounding translates, something like that. I'm wondering if you have certain things where through the years you've been like that one thing, like whether it's lateral quickness or whether it's, positional size or whether it's, open catch and shoot percentage or
Okay.
whether it's something like an analytic, like box plus minus, like, box plus minus in a Power 5 conference or something like that. What are three things that translate for you? And then maybe
Number
three things that don't.
number
Yeah.
one, coachability. Number two, the ability to actually like read angles, right, and kind of figure out what you're doing off those angles. And number three would be like hustle and grit. And two of those things are completely in each player's control, right? You don't. That's purely up to that player, and I mean that kind of just goes into having the right mindset, and showing the right things. And I think that kind of is something that we severely underrate.
Can you say those
draft.
three things again? So it was coachability, hustle, motor. What was the second thing?
And ability to read angles.
Do you know who I'm thinking of when you say that?
Who?
Adu Thiero.
Yeah, well, we can talk about him if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about him as a second round target for the Raptors, but I really love him. I love him. I think late bloomers always a good story. So, what do you think of Adu Thiero?
Well, I think my pro comp for him is kind of like a Jaime Jaquez, if that makes sense. Highly energetic swingman, makes plenty of hustle plays, really, really good finisher at the rim. Doesn't make a high volume of threes, but looks to be a projectable shooter, right? And he's just super athletic, strong, explosive first step. Looks to be one of the more NBA ready guys in the class.
Could a smarter Jonathan Kuminga materialize in front of our eyes in Adu Thiero?
Shoot, a smarter Jonathan Kuminga might be an all-star.
I know. That's the elevator pitch.
I can see it.
Yeah. No, he's a very interesting player. Okay, what about three things that don't translate?
Volume scoring. Particularly if you're just like a heavy on-ball guy, unless you're Cooper Flagg, unless you're like one of these elite prospects, these guys that are fresh, unless you're coming in as a freshman, right, and being one of the best freshmen, and you're kind of known as that. If you're 22 years old, I don't care if you're in your 6'1" point guard who doesn't play defense. I don't care if you're scoring 30 points a game, right? Just because you can score the hell out of the ball, I don't value that. Second of all, things that don't translate. Sorry. A lot of the time, athleticism. And that's going back into the whole functional athleticism that I went about before. A lot of these guys, as I said, can jump out of the gym, right? But they can't do it in a game setting, right? We get excited about these guys having 40-inch verticals, but it doesn't matter if they can't pull it off in a game, right? It doesn't matter if they can't actually put that to good use, if they can't, realize what they have to do and read everything quite right. It doesn't matter, right? Third would be strength or lack thereof. I think a lot of players at the collegiate level can get away with not being quite as strong. But once you hit that NBA, once you get in those, like, start hitting those NBA bodies, you're really going to struggle.
Right. I hear you. I do want to ask you, like, there are certain players where a lot of gaps have to be sort of hypothetical. Right?
There are exceptions to what I just said, by the way. That's not a rule for everybody. That's just generally the best you can do. Yeah.
Of course. So I was thinking of guys like Peyton Watson, right? Where, okay, not very productive.
Terrible. Terrible. Right. Yeah. And frankly, I don't think he'd return if this was 2020. I think he would have returned if this was 2025. I don't think that we're going to be projecting guys as much now because they're not going to need to go to the NBA. They can go back with NIL. Mm-hmm. I don't think this whole, for years we've had to kind of have these hypothetical concepts and hypothetical players where you have to look at the tape. I think 5 years from now, that type of thing is going to be eliminated completely. That's my belief.
But we have a guy like, that, and you just have to kind of guess what he could do with a larger role. Now, he played a great game today, and he was instrumental in the Nuggets
Yeah.
actually winning a Game 7, a very huge Game 7. And the fact that he is a 28th, 29th overall pick who's contributed majorly on his rookie deal. You look at a guy like Christian Braun, who maybe had a lot more productivity in college. There's a lot fewer holes that you have to plug for Christian Braun than you do with someone like that, with someone like Peyton Watson. So I think about a guy like Carter Bryant, who came off the bench for Arizona. How do you technically scout a hypothetical? Like what? Because I mean, like, okay, with Carter Bryant, like using your own metrics of what translates and what doesn't, how do you fill in all those gaps that are missing?
Okay, the number one thing I do with these kind of guys is I have a hell of a lot of conversations, right? Whether that's with other scouts who do it in the media, like myself, or I'm talking to coaches, people that have worked with him closely, to get as many perspectives as I can, right? Particularly if they've worked with that guy and they're actually have been part of a team with that guy, hearing, how coachable that guy is, how willing this guy is to improve, that's like so valuable. I can't even put into words how valuable that is, hearing those kind of things about these kind of players. And I have heard that about Carter Bryant. But it's just, as I said, you want to get as many perspectives as possible if you're someone in my position. And then you kind of just got to go with it. I mean, a lot of it is also going to be team fit and how you feel like certain organizations have gone with players like this in the past, right? Like if you're a player with a low floor but a high ceiling and you're one of those guys, Charlotte's going to take you and Charlotte's going to ruin you, right? There's certain franchises that you just don't want to see these kind of guys go to.
Right.
And then I guess the last thing, you just got to look at the tape and say, is this going to work at an NBA level, right? And that's the best you can do. I mean, there's not a whole lot of like concrete stuff that you do to protect these guys. As I said, it's a high risk to reward.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at this point, we'll take any questions for Nick. There are a couple here. I wanted to go with this one. How close of a player is Misi with Malauch? Personally, I don't think they're very close, but
they're not close at all. I don't think Missy is an NBA player this year.
Yeah, no, of course. But like in terms of projecting Yves Missi from Baylor and Khaman Malauch and his first year at Duke, apart from the fact that they're both African prospects, I don't really see the comparison. But I guess how close? Yeah. I wonder if you mean
also Missi is also a great rebounder, and that's where Malauch struggles. I don't see that comp at all, actually.
Yeah, I think one question that I do have about Malauch, and it's the same question I had about Missi, is how good is their playmaking? Do they have some short roll playmaking stuff? Right. So I was pretty convinced when Yves Missi was on the board at 19 and the Raptors were on the board. I was like, damn, that's an obvious pick for the Raptors. They go with Jacoby Walter. Made me rethink my entire, life at that moment. I was like, what? How did we pass?
I was very high on Jacoby Walter last year, but I think that's definitely been shown to be the wrong pick.
You were high on who?
Jacoby Walter last year. And I probably would have done the same thing. I mocked him to the Raptors quite a lot. But yeah, Missi would have been a much better fit.
Well, interestingly enough, I had Missi 11th on my board and I had Jacoby 17th. So when it came to 19 and they were both there, my obvious was go for Missi. But I'm actually happier that we got. I'm happier with Jacoby, to be honest.
Oh, okay,
the numbers may not have stuck out, but I think his process was awesome. He had a couple of injuries with the Raptors, but I think he got so much better. And towards the second half of the year, he shot like close to 40% from three, which I just think is great.
A guy like this, he's not going to get a whole lot of minutes, a whole lot of like ability to produce. You kind of just got to work with the flashes, work with what he. I used to do this with Bryce McGowan's a lot. When Bryce McGowan was on the Hornets, I was very high on Bryce McGowan's, and so I'd be pulling up the same 6 clips over and over and over to try and prove that he was something, because you just got to find these little moments where they do certain things. You know what I mean? And I think Jacoby Walter had a few of those moments this year for sure.
Yeah. Mohammed Noor said, are there any draft prospects you personally saw playing and evaluated them, or most of the time you just look at videos on the net like a lot of us? So I think a player that we didn't even get to talk about, which is Rocco Zakarski, you've seen him play live, I'm assuming, yeah?
Yeah, so being in Australia, it's kind of hard to see all these guys live, but with the Australian guys, I've seen all of them live, and so I travel around. I've seen 4 to 5 Rocco Zakarski. I've seen 4 to 5 Brisbane Bullets games. I haven't seen a lot of Rocco Zakarski games because he doesn't play, right? He kind of just sits at the end of the bench and he might get 4 or 5 minutes, but I've seen all the next stars play. Yeah, especially Ben Henschel and Ethan Almanza, being from Perth, where I'm from. I've seen all the games live.
Any thoughts on Rocco Sikorsky as a player at the next level? I mean, very early in the draft process, I thought he had really interesting athleticism for a 7'3" guy. Like I thought he moved really well for someone who's 7'3". Like usually you just don't see that. I thought he had pretty good rim protecting instincts, and more than anything, I just thought what a great player to put on the third string behind Jakob Poeltl. You know, like that would just be such a great 1-for-1 mentorship. But do you think he probably goes back? Do you think he'll drop out of the draft? He's going back.
I can tell you with like good intel, I don't think he's staying in this draft. From what I know, now things can change depending on what kind of feedback he does get and what his agent can kind of feel out. Again, these things change on a day-to-day basis, but from what I know as of now, he's not staying in the draft.
That sucks.
Same thing, I think. Actually, again, I'm not certain on Ethan Almanza, but with Malik Lewis and Lachlan Olbrich as well, two of the other NBL next stars that declared, they're not staying in the draft as of now.
Gotcha. Well, this has been a very illuminating discussion. I think we got through a lot of really good questions here. Death 4K saying, do you think Trey Johnson can mold into some form of James Harden? We didn't talk about Trey Johnson at all.
I really hope not, because if he becomes some kind of on-ball player, he's not going to succeed. I don't buy into any ability for him to be an on-ball star player. I have been low on him all year because that's kind of what he has tried to be. I've gotten higher at the end of this year because I think that he's going to be a role player, an off-ball kind of movement shooter. And if he's in that role, I think he can have quite a lot of success at the NBA level. But if he comes out and tries to be some James Harden, he's going to fall out of the league quite fast.
Clutch Tatum said, you draft around 7 to 9. Are you drafting best position or fit?
Yeah, we've already got an answer on
best
this. Best potential or best like player
best potential available? Or fit? So I think like, are you drafting best player or are you drafting for fit around 7 to 9?
Well, Ujiri had an interview recently where he said he's just taking best player available. That's all he's interested in with their first round selection.
They always do.
Yeah, right. But personally, I think in this kind of class, you kind of got to go a bit more fit, right? If you're outside the top 6, you're probably not getting a franchise-changing guy or a guy you think can be a franchise-changing guy. You're probably going for a around the edges piece, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're going for those guys, you obviously have to pick for fit. That's my opinion, at least. Now, if he has to jump up to say 6 and up, then it's best player available.
That is interesting. I think sometimes like when people are deciding between, should we pick the best player available or should we draft for fit? I think there's often this element, which is you're almost always drafting best player available based on who you are as a team. So like the way you want to play basketball, right? So if you need your big to do certain things, like you need your big to be a playmaker, there's certain bigs that you're just going to rule off. Or if you prefer your wings to be plus size, or you prefer your wings to be two-way wings, I don't know. I think every organization has sort of shown that there's a player type that they tend to value, and then there's a player type that they tend to ignore. Like, you can certainly see it in certain teams where they tend to draft a lot of guys from Power 5 conference, like or the Power 5. They tend to, or there's some teams that just consistently draft from like the Big 12. It's just like always kind of there. There's certain teams that almost always draft guys with like a 4, 5, 6 plus wingspan, right? So yeah, like I think as much as people want to say we're drafting the best player available, it's still the best player available as a subjective evaluation by you. Yes. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. Final question here from Mark Tavares, which is thoughts on Thomas Sorber and a potential fit on the Raptors.
I like Thomas Sorber quite a lot, actually. I was quite disappointed when he was injured for the rest of the season. When he came out, I love watching him play. He's an NBA level rebounder, protects the rim well. Got pretty good feel for a player of his size, and he defends the pick and roll quite well. He's not a 3-point shooter now, not a stretch shooter, but he's shown some pretty good touch in the mid-range, and I think that his 3-point shot is coming along quite well and developing. And he's another guy that's just improves game after game after game. Like, his rate of improvement over the past year is like a bit shocking almost, right? And the sky is the limit for this guy.
Would you take him in the lottery?
Yes, depending on fit.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly am there. I watched a little bit of high school tape on him, and he seemed like so much lighter in high school. And then watching him in Georgetown, he feels a little bit heavy. You know, he felt a little bit too heavy, like maybe even a little bit heavy-footed. Did you sense that a lot with him?
I think so. I think a lot of that is just he's put a lot on him quite fast, and so that's going to be less of an issue at the NBA level because he needed that to be at the NBA level. So I think he has gotten a bit, as you said, heavier footed, but I think it's for the best. And that may not be showing out at the collegiate level, but that will be showing out at the NBA level.
Anyways, man, thanks a lot for coming on. Really appreciate you having this conversation. And we got one more question to beat the buzzer here from Rashad Freeman. Not sure if I missed it, but any thoughts on Asa Newell?
Yeah, no, moves well laterally, super projectable, can be a good defender, rebounds it very, very well, great rebounder. I quite like him.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know if I like him in the lottery, but I definitely do like him. I think I prefer Noah Senge over him, but we'll see. You know, lately I've been seeing a lot of Noah Senge in top 10, top 12 conversations. It'd be very interesting to see.
Out like 3 for me at one point, and he's fallen out of the first. He's like end of first round for me towards like mid first round for me right now. But he's fallen quite a bit, man, personally.
Yeah. Anyways, Mark said, great live. Thank you, Rob and Nick. Appreciate you, Mark, as always. And thanks a lot for coming on, Nick. One last time, where can people find you?
Draftstack.substack.com. Check it out there. Subscribe. We're putting out daily content. We got a massive team. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think we put out the best draft content in the game. So if you guys are trying to follow along a bit more with the draft, I'd really recommend checking us out and subscribing. We got a great team over there. We also do video content. You can find our YouTube, just search Draft Stack. That's where you can find my interview with Dash Daniels and Alex Tui as well. I have other interviews with other international prospects like Noah Pender. That's all up on the site. We also put out scouting reports, short scouting reports on our YouTube. So if you're looking for a quick breakdown on a player, that's the place to go. And we're going to be putting out, in some cases, 2 hours a day.
Awesome, man. I appreciate your content. Thanks a lot for taking time to come on. I know it's like very weird time difference between us sitting here in Toronto and you sitting in Perth, but appreciate you making it on, and maybe we'll have you on again when the Raptors do finalize their selections, and you can give us like a deep dive onto who the hell the Raptors have just drafted.
Yeah, or even after the lottery. I'm happy to come on a few times. I've really enjoyed it.
Appreciate you so much, Nick. Thanks.
All right, have a good one.
All right, see you guys. Everyone, please hit like, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and definitely go check out Nick's channel and also Nick's Substack. The links are in the description. Cheers.
And you can find me at Nic Thomas NBA on Twitter. Sorry.
There you go. Third plug. All right. Peace.